There was a gentle side to him, but there was also this kind of evil side to him as well, you know? It was a very interesting, I guess, upbringing for me. But my dad now is my dad. He raised me. He was a football coach. That's how my mom met him, was through some mutual friends that are all football coaches. And, you know, he really just took me under his wing. And that's kind of how I got into sports and football and everything else. And, you know, stayed here for school. And that's where I met Annie, was at Green Valley. And
your wife.
Yeah, my wife.
Your beautiful children.
Yep, exactly. Vegas born and raised boy, and, you know, been here ever since.
So is Nicksick your mother's maiden name, or is it your
It's my
dad?
dad now.
Okay.
Yeah, he adopted me when they got married, and I took his name.
Well, welcome to the Built for Growth podcast, E. What's going on?
Dude, I'm excited. I'm
Yeah?
excited. Like, I feel like I'm on like a lot of pressure.
You know, I know that you do a lot of talking about MMA, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
that's what you do. But I don't want to start there. I want to start with like the kid, Eric.
Oh, yeah. That little guy?
Yeah. What was your upbringing like? I never got to know this.
Born and raised in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And so was my mom. So, you know,
I
I've
knew
been...
that explains a lot.
Yeah, been a part of this Vegas culture for a very long time. Grandpa had a lot of land. We grew up off of Jones and Oquendo, kind of right where the PI is.
Yep.
Horses, a lot of livestock.
Well, so that used to be his land, basically, where the PI is.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He owned acres of land, and like over time, he would slowly like sell some of that acreage off to developers or homes and things like that. And you know, he made very good money doing that. He was a dealer at the Trop, pit boss for a long time. My great grandfather was out here. He was Benny Binions' bodyguard. So just a lot of like old school Vegas cowboy roots. And then there was my dad, who was from Italy. I'm half Italian, which is crazy. So my dad moved out to Las Vegas, and he was more in like the mob side of things when it came to Vegas.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Where are the bodies, Eric?
Exactly. I don't know. Maybe my mom knows. I don't know. But you know, my dad was actually murdered when I was 2 or 3 years old. Yeah, maybe 2.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So this is kind of a crazy story. So when I was born, my name was Marcello Valerio Parente. That was on my birth certificate.
Whoa.
So I was named after my dad, and you know, my mom started to catch on to what he was up to throughout, you know, Las Vegas and the drug scene and the club scene and things like that. And then I think it was like right before my 2nd or 3rd birthday, he was murdered at the Continental Club, a hotel here. And when that happened, my mom decided to change my name completely and kind of just pull me away from that entire side of the family. So I never met any part of my dad's side of the family until my senior year in high school.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Do you even remember your dad?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, which is crazy. Like I remember like I can see it now. Like I can see the couch, I can see the living room, I can see like, you know, just like spot images of those situations. But so my mom and dad were split up. I say my father, my mom and my father were split up. My mom started dating my dad now, right? And I remember being a kid in the apartment, and my real dad coming like to the apartment kind of unannounced, was like hitting the door, and like me hiding my dad now in my closet as a kid, because my real dad probably would have killed him.
Whoa.
Yes. Yeah. Crazy, right?
That is wild.
Yeah. So I remember like seeing that closet. I remember putting my dad now in my closet and like kind of like hiding him with like clothes or something, or like stuffed animals. My mom was like, "Go hide him," and I did. I hid him in my closet.
Did she let your bio father in?
I don't remember.
Don't know. Okay, you just remember that.
Yeah, I remember like, you know, during the heat of things when they were split up, we were living in this apartment, and like if he was going out to do something bad, like she would come to the door and tell my mom to take me to grandma and grandpa's house until he told them it was okay to come back. So I knew like as a kid, it was very, traumatic, but like you just remember those memories of that.
You don't really know any different.
Yeah.
So you get older and you're like, wait.
Yeah. So
crazy.
But it was cool because my mom was always very open with me about understanding who and what my dad was. You know, there was a gentle side to him, but there was also this kind of evil side to him as well, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting, I guess, upbringing for me. But you know, my dad now is my dad. He raised me. He was a football coach. That's how my mom met him was through some mutual friends that are all football coaches. And, you know, he really just took me under his wing. And that's kind of how I got into sports and football and everything else. And, you know, stayed here for school. And that's where I met Annie, was at Green Valley. And
your wife.
Yeah, my wife. Yeah.
All your beautiful children.
Yep, exactly. So,
that's so cool.
So Vegas.
So is Nicksick your mother's maiden name, or is it your
it's
dad?
My dad now.
Okay.
Yeah, he adopted me when they got married and I took his name.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a similar story without the mafia part. But my biological father, I didn't know about until I was 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't in my life. And then my dad, who raised me, came into my life at about 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you've met Rob before.
A number of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's my, you know, technically my stepdad, but, you know, he raised me. You just can't look at him any different. Right?
100%.
I mean, they're there.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. It's like the family that chooses you and that you choose.
Right. And then now, like, for us being parents, I understand the gravity of that. Mm-hmm. Right. Like I know now, like, I have my own kids and I know how I would feel in a similar way if I was raising somebody else's kid.
Yeah.
You know, so even more so, it makes it feel more commendable at what they did for us, you know, as a parent.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad was in the Army. He was originally from Connecticut, and then he got stationed out in Fort Lewis up in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he met my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So I was about 3 years old, and he was more like a big brother at first because he was just, gosh, my dad's a couple years younger than my mom, and I was born on my mom's 22nd birthday. My mom and I actually have the same birthday.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, August 18th. Yeah. So he was just like a kid. He was probably 22 when, you know, but a young 22,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
I remember we would roughhouse a lot. It was one of my favorite things because I had never had that kind of play as a kid. And he would throw me on the bed, and I just thought it was like the best thing ever. And he'd flip me. And one time he like over rotated me, and my knees came right into my face and smashed and broke my nose. And he's like, oh my God, he broke her.
Oh, it broke your nose?
Probably was my first break. It probably was. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's be honest. But I remember I was bleeding everywhere, but I loved it. He was so much fun.
Where's he at now?
Still up in Washington.
Okay.
Yeah, they're still together.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff though. Good old memories. So what sports did you play growing up?
Full-time football. Mm-hmm. Skill position players, myself and other quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, defensive backs, things like that. It became a year-round sport for us. So if you played like offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, sometimes depending on where you're at, he was okay. Our coach was okay with those guys wrestling. And they were very good. But like skill position wise, we had so much things that we did in the off season that I showed up to wrestling, didn't think it was a problem. And I'll never forget, like our coach goes walking by like the wrestling room. And remember like the little like square window, like you could barely see. And I remember he's a little short little dude. I remember him like walking by and I saw the top of his head. And I remember him just like getting on his tippy toes and looking in and seeing me, opens the door, is like, get the fuck out of here. Like, you're not wrestling. I was like, well, why? Like Coach Steen was our wrestling coach. He coached football as well. Like thought it was a good idea. So that was it. Like I was literally got like a week of hard ass wrestling in. I loved it. And then my head football coach was like, nah, dude, you're not wrestling. So that was put an end to that pretty quick.
Yeah. Do you wish that you would have done more martial arts now? Like looking back?
Well, I did. I was always in martial arts to some capacity.
Okay.
All through high school, I was doing stuff. My mom would take me like Kempo schools and, you know, I was doing martial arts, but football was always the main focus. Then when I got to college, at this time in Las Vegas, there really wasn't an MMA gym. Mm-hmm. There was a Vale Tudo gym. There was a couple little things. There was no like real jiu-jitsu.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 97.
Okay.
97. And I can't remember when, I know I was in college or maybe just right out of college, John Lewis opened JSEC, right? And that was like the first like actual like American jiu-jitsu black belt that was in Las Vegas, that was actual good training. Like Randy was going there to train, Chuck Liddell was going there to train. But I was still like a kid in college, you know, but I would go over it. My mom would bring me down there and I would like learn some jiu-jitsu, learn some stuff. But it was never like, this is what I wanted to do. It was just more to occupy my time. And I was so interested in learning that was the one place that I really like enjoyed. So it kind of sparked my interest in MMA.
So how did you get connected with that world of MMA? Like, how'd you know that gym popped up? I imagine social media wasn't everywhere.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. You're right. So I was bartending. I was going to school for the fire department. And then we had a bar.
You were gonna be a fire. Were you a fireman?
I got hired by all 3 departments.
And then you were like, peace?
That's a whole nother story.
Oh, is that for off air?
Yeah. Well, now we can add that in. We can add it in as we go. But yeah, so one of the guys I was bartending with, he was like, he had his own school out here, and he would always encourage us to come out and train. He was more like a Sansu guy, but he had a brown belt under John Jock Machado. And I was like, oh, dude, like this is kind of what, and anybody that was a blue belt was going to teach you something at that point. But this guy being a brown belt under John Jock Machado really sparked my interest. So I would just go over there and train some jiu-jitsu with him. And then, unfortunately, like at our bar, that 3 Angry Wives, he got jumped and like ended up like hip tossing this guy, breaking this dude's shoulder. And his buddy came behind him and stabbed him. Stabbed. His name is Eric Drobny. Stabbed him in his back after like breaking this dude's arm, kicking this dude's ass, like all on video too. It was crazy.
Wait, so he got stabbed after kicking everybody's ass, or he stabbed
like 2 guys and 2 guys that I actually knew from high school. Like crazy enough, 2 guys that I actually knew from high school were disputing this tab. It was like $20. Like just pay the bill. They bring him out. They bring Eric like outside to like kind of like try to fight him. Right. And Eric just fucks one of them up.
Is Eric one of the owners?
No, he was the graveyard. He was the graveyard bartender at the time. And then one of them went and grabbed like a fisherman's knife or a hunting knife, and then like came around the side of the building and caught him under the lung right here. And then he basically like Peterson like kind of grabbed the elbow and then went like with the Kimura and like broke this dude's arm after he got stabbed. This crazy thing, right? Savage. But he lost so much blood that he ended up like becoming like having seizures and epileptic and everything else, to the point where he had to close the school down. And not only close the school down, he couldn't bartend, couldn't work, this whole crazy thing. So I had a mutual friend, and we caught wind that Randy was opening up Xtreme Couture. We couldn't find this place for the life of me. So remember, like Sunset never went through. So
I didn't know that. I didn't live here long enough. Because I'm not from Vegas. I'm from Washington.
True.
I think I first experience in Vegas for me was in like 2013
when
I coached the Ultimate Fighter.
Against
Ronda.
So I mean, that at that point, at least like, so the 215 barely was even open, maybe not even open all the way. There were all those connector roads.
Okay.
So you would get off on Decatur.
There's still a lot of those weird roads over in that area that don't totally go through.
100%.
Like just dead ends and weird.
Yeah. Okay. So at the time, like 215 was just all these feeder roads. It wasn't even a connect. All of them were lights. So you can get to the Decatur and you'd be stuck at a light essentially.
Okay.
And then you would have to wait, and then you get to Jones and everything else. So you would go to Decatur, get off on Decatur, and then now the right that we make on Sunset, that was not there. That was a railroad tracks. So you couldn't cross over there. You'd have to go all the way down to Russell, make a right on Russell, make a right on Valley View, and head all the way back. Right? So Town Square wasn't there. None of that stuff was open. So you had Las Vegas Boulevard, but you had railroad tracks that cut everything off. So for us to even find this place was a miracle. I mean, like you said, it was well before iPhones, I'm sure.
Right.
Well before maps. Like there was nothing there. So how we found this place, and then not only that, there was no signage. So we walked in, and literally like me and my friend were like, well, should we go in? Should we check it out? Yeah, let's go. We walk in, and they didn't even have a front desk yet, but we saw Randy and a bunch of guys training in the back. Open the front door, basically the door that we come in for the front entrance. It was only that one building. We didn't have the building next door. So it was just the one side of the gym.
Just the side where the weights are and the half mat, not where the cages are.
Yep. So
okay.
They had a cage set up, no flooring. But
of course not.
I think maybe they had the mats down. Maybe. This is like late December, maybe right after Christmas. And I just remember being cold. I remember being super cold in there. And then like, so they had the roll door like halfway rolled up. They had like this, it looked like an F-16 engine, right? And
heating
it's like
the place?
pumping heat. But meanwhile, it was like carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh my God.
This sounds so familiar to my experience at Dennis Hallman's gym, but they all come from the same era. So anyways, continue.
But so you get the situation.
Yeah, we would train at Dennis Hallman's. It was a barn, basically, glorified barn with padded walls on it. And the mats would be so cold, they'd be hard. Like when you'd be running on them at first, they'd hurt your feet because they'd be like almost frozen
over.
And then they would turn on these giant propane like tanks with like, you know, you'd hear that, and then the place would kind of warm up, but everyone would be like,
dude, everybody's ready to pass out. Yeah, I just remember thinking that at the time, like me being in fire department, like going to the fire department.
When was this too, by the way? What year was
2006, right before 2007. Either it was like, I just remember like it being around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And Randy had the Tim Sylvia fight. I remember like they were training for that. I think he ended up fighting Tim Sylvia that March of 2007, if I remember the dates correctly. But the first person that greeted me was Mike Pyle. And he was like, yo, hey, what y'all doing in here? You know, like this Tennessee draw.
Yeah.
And I was like, when you guys opening, we just came to check it out, get some information. Mike had no idea when they were opening. Like there was nothing, but he goes like, hey, if you guys want to come start training, you guys can. Be here at this time tomorrow. I was like, dude, I'm just like learning, trying to get to grapple. He's like, perfect. You know,
we need bodies.
We need
basically,
bodies,
right?
Exactly. So myself and my friend Tony, we showed up the next day, and it was just Mike and Jay, and I want to say Gray was there, maybe Alessio, and just got the shit kicked out of us. But mainly, I just remember it being Mike Pyle just kicking the shit out of me. I was probably 230 pounds at the time, like just got done with football, lifting heavyweight. And I'm like, how is this dude just manhandling me?
And Alessio's probably like 170.
Well, Alessio fought at 170 and eventually moved down to 55.
Yeah.
Gray fought at 55, probably walked at 190 at the time.
Yeah.
You know, but Pyle was a pretty big welterweight at 170. So I'd say Mike was probably 200 pounds maybe at the time. You know, but either way, like it was just every 10 seconds, I was just getting tapped with something. And I was like, dude, this is the place to be. Like I could not get enough. So Mike's like, y'all coming back tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yep. And then I realized it was like our like somewhat green light, like them beating the shit out of us. But I was too dumb to figure that out at the time. So I was like, oh, I'll see you tomorrow. And I'll just beat to shit, you know? And then the next day just getting ragdolled left and right, you know? So yeah, that was literally how I started at Xtreme, and they finally opened, I think February. I remember being like the Super Bowl, and that was like their grand opening. I was member number one, literally member number one in the database. I was the first member that got signed up.
Damn.
Yeah.
This is crazy how much we have in common. I feel like the same thing happened when I showed up for wrestling the first day, and I was the only girl. Well, my friend Sharon and I were the only girls, and they just green lighted our asses. Like there's like, oh, not, you know, girls are not meant for this. Just they're too stupid to figure that out. So we'll make it real simple for them.
Make it real tough. And they're like, they didn't figure out that you're tough as shit. You're gonna keep coming back.
Exactly. I was the stupid one though. I feel like, you know, I was like, I never got the memo evidently.
Isn't it funny though, now we look back, we're like, oh, we were the ones getting greenlit.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, it was so character forging, and I'm glad that I never figured out that that's, you know, or even if I did put two and two together at the time, which I don't recall doing, I just loved it so much.
Me too. And you know, the biggest thing for me was, and I loved the people that I worked with in the bar industry. They were great human beings, but there was no depth, I think, to what their life was going to be. Meaning like the rat race of being a bartender, you made great money, but it was the same thing over and over, right? You would work, you get off work, you'd gamble, you drink, you smoke, you do whatever. You're home at 3 a.m. and it was a rinse and repeat. I had no like validation, nothing that was helping push me or giving me some sort of just anything really at all, like any depth, to the point when I walked into Xtreme, the first thing that I recognized was the camaraderie. I noticed like right away, like and that was the type of individual that I wanted to start surrounding myself with more and more. Whether it was to be a pro fighter, whether it was a coach, it had nothing to do with that. It had more to do with about surrounding myself with like-minded individuals that were going to bring my level up, rather than, what do you do today? Oh, fucking slept till noon, you know, because I'm hungover. It's like, man, I can't do that anymore. Like, I just didn't want to be around stuff like that, you know? Was
that a conscious thought at the time, or was that something that you look back on and realize now?
I think more subconscious than anything. I think I was just lost in a lot of ways, to the point when I walked in, it was more of an epiphany. It wasn't me searching for it. It kind of hit me in the face. Like, oh, okay. Like, I have something here that so what happens is you get ostracized from that other side, right? Getting the invites from that other group, and then you're getting more invites from the more positive group that are helping you and developing you into something bigger and better.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of not taking things out of your life, but replacing them with better things.
Sure.
That's why people fail, I think, at a lot of things that they do is because they try to just remove, like, I'm going to go on a diet, for example. People fail at this all the time. I'm just going to try to remove something out of my life. I'm just going to take this out, take this out, take this out. And it's like, now life sucks. It's like, you got to put some good shit in the place of that.
100%.
And that's how you get better.
100%. Yeah. And then when you start seeing the benefits from it, right? Like, you start training with guys like Mike Pyle and Dennis Davis and, people that all of a sudden you start seeing your skills jump through the roof and you feel self-actualization that being a part of something, you're being rewarded for your hard work, and it wasn't about a year into being at Xtreme, I got my first coaching job, right? Randy's like, hey, can you run this practice for me? This coach didn't show up and I had an opportunity and I took it. So I ran Friday grappling practice. I was, at the time we didn't have really anybody in gi anyway. It was all no gi.
Right.
So I was like, well, dude, what am I gonna coach? Like I'm not even a freaking anything yet. But what it did was it forced me into position to really try to advance my knowledge the best that I could, to the point where I loved that class so much that I had the best numbers. I was having 16 to 20 people show up to an 11 a.m. class on Fridays. And people are like, well, what are you doing? It wasn't my knowledge. It was just my enthusiasm. Like, I was so happy to be there. I genuinely loved it and cared about it. I was promoting it on Facebook, or MySpace. Or
MySpace, I was going to say Facebook. I don't even know if that was just barely coming out then.
Yeah. So no, it was cool, man. Like that was really my first opportunity at Xtreme, and it opened the doors for me.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I think about my moments as coaching. People ask me too, are you going to become a coach? Everybody knows that my career is coming to a close. Probably won't be fighting that much longer, but I'm like, hell no. No. It was like, that is such an intensive job, a labor of love. I think it's a thankless job. I think,
that's interesting because you're so good though. Like when I hear you communicate a lot of times with even the females, like the point when you were a champion and the height of your career at Xtreme, you kept so many people in line.
No, thanks.
But you really did though. Like, I remember like when you left, I was like, dude, we're fucking, I need your help. Like
when I went to Singapore, was it?
Yeah, I was like, can you come back, please? Like, this is tough. But you had such a good, I think just with your work ethic alone, the way that you showed up, the way that you carried yourself, your leadership skills, but everybody listened to you in the room, girl or guy, if you had something to say, and it was always good shit, so I'm surprised that you wouldn't want to coach.
No, I
maybe
appreciate
a Maya.
You know what? Yeah, maybe a Maya. Maybe invest in those little ones. But I appreciate that. First of all, thank you. That's a great compliment, because what I was going to say about you is that's one of my absolute favorite things about you is your ability to command a room. You command respect, but it's not because for any negative connotation. You just bring an energy to the room, and people want to sit and listen, and they want to learn from you. And that when I've had you in my corner, it's like what you bring to me is the most important element. Because I could learn moves from anybody. Yeah. I can learn, skills, and I can pick up things. And I think at this point in the game too, I've kind of learned most of the things that so I'm trying to perfect, keep the knife as sharp as possible. But when I have you in my corner, it's like this mental switch that you're able to tap into. Yeah. And I think that's what makes a great coach. That was one of my best compliments I've ever received from anybody. That was your fight week against Lauren Murphy. You wrote me this long text, and it was like, I just remember having tears in my eyes, just because of knowing as a coach, it's not necessarily the X's and O's sometimes. It's just how you can make somebody feel when they're going into battle. When you look over and go, dude, I know this dude's got my back. I know this motherfucker over here's got my back. No, nothing. They're going to get the best out of me in the moments that I need it the most. And I know the one default I'm always going to get in my career is always, he was never a pro fighter. And I know that's always going to be the one thing that people will always go at. And it's okay. Like, I'm okay with that. I live in those shoes. But what I will tell you is that I show up every day with enthusiasm. I show up every day knowing... How many NFL coaches were pro? God knows. Probably not too many. Probably not that many, I wouldn't think. I'm just saying, though, that's just small-minded. People don't understand that it's a different skill set. You don't have to actually be professional, most elite world champion. Because a lot of times, if you are that, you don't actually know how to be a good coach. You only know how to be a good executor. Correct. You don't always. It doesn't translate back and forth. So, anyways, what I've noticed is that a lot of people, like, I'll use Ray as an example. Ray is one of the best strikers in the world. Ray Sefo, 6-time world champ, K1 kickboxer. Ray fought a particular style though.
So Ray coaches a particular style to what Ray fought, right? Now, Ray over time has adapted and done other things. And I think Ray was one of the most evolutionary guys when it came to striking with his switch steps that he didn't even know what he was doing half the time.
He's like a 200 and I don't know how much he weighs, 25, 30, 50, 250.
Oh,
no, he weighed more than that, probably 250. He's like a ballerina though at that weight.
Unreal. Speed, vision, talent. So sometimes you'll hear Ray like, that won't work. And I'm like, that won't work on you, right? It'll work on a lot of other people, but you're an exception to that rule. But he was just so cutting edge. But when you hear Ray coach, sometimes you can understand that Ray is a savant. Ray does things by natural instincts. And
not everybody, it won't work like that for everybody.
Exactly. And it's very hard for him to be able to articulate and coach it in a certain way. For me, like having Ray as my coach and then having Dwayne Ludwig and other striking coaches that I've been around, I don't have a particular style. So I'm able to go, I can implement something that Ray does, something that Dwayne does, something that maybe Dennis did or Joey Varner or whoever. I can take all of that and apply it to the right people. So Uriah Hall is going to be a different striker than Brad Zavares. I coached them both at the same time, but Uriah was more a dynamic, fast twitch setups where Brad fit more that Ray Cepho mold. So I think not having pro fights, I don't take my particular style and try to implement it onto another athlete. I'm able to adapt and take other styles and fit what that person might need.
Yeah. I think that when I said that I would never consider coaching, what I mean by that though is the amount of dedication and time that you have to put into that.
Oh man.
That's what I don't have. And so I would never do someone a disservice by saying, hey, yeah, I'll coach you and not do the work that you do. And people don't realize that. It's not just you showing up and teaching an hour and a half pro practice.
It's prep.
It's the countless hours of, watching the footage of their sparring partners and listening to them when they're having a hard day and they call you up on the phone and they just need to pick me up. And then in coming to the gym when they're sparring and coming for their grappling practices and making sure that it's all meshing and then being that communication piece between all the coaches. There's so much work. And then you add the travel, right? Because it's not like these are always in your backyard, right? So there's a ton of sacrifice. And I know how important family is to you.
Yeah.
And I know how much, you have to sacrifice sometimes that or try to find the balance in it, I would imagine, which is got to be difficult.
It's so difficult. And I think like you're going to miss birthdays. You're going to miss dance recitals. You're going to miss soccer games. What I've noticed and I've learned from our history with Robert, that you have to surround yourself with people that appreciate your time and energy and effort that you're putting in with them. Because the time that you're taking away, you're never going to get back, and your family is the one that's robbed of it. But when your fighters know that and they care and they pay you correctly, they appreciate your time, they do all the things that they can do to value the time that you're losing out with your family, that's when it actually feels like it works. You know what I mean? And I think that to me is when I started to understand more of what was going on with Robert, there was a number of things, right? But the one thing that really stood out was this is such a draining sport on him. You always, as a coach, you're always the one that is asking how everyone's doing. Very rarely do people come into you and be like, hey, how are you doing, bro? Or how's your day, right? Or what's going on? It's always everybody else's problems thrown on your lap, and you're the one trying to help and figure out. How many times have you and I over the years called Robert and with a problem, right? A lot. Like you and I called Robert a bunch. Yo, I need your advice on this, or can I meet you up for this? Right. And over time, like for me, that's where I feel like in his loss and even like communicating more with Rick, how I've figured out how to communicate better with certain fighters, certain individuals, but also with his brother, Rick Follis.
Oh, okay.
But with myself, even as a coach, right? Like it's a very, very, it's a job of servitude, man. You're a slave to everybody, but it's what we signed up for. And is what I appreciate the most about it is working with people like yourself, right? That care, that give a shit about your time.
Yeah. Well, I value it. And I definitely don't think, it's an easy job. No. And that's why I like teaching, but I just don't think that I would be able to fit the shoes that you fit and doing everything that you do. And, I look at myself and I say like, okay, well, I'm still fighting, now I'm passion pursuit of this podcast. Yeah. I've got my 2 little kids, which I feel like I'm mom. There's also something a little different about mom. it would be so much harder probably for you and Annie to swap roles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have a ton of respect for what Annie does. You know, keeping the house together and managing the kids and taking care of their boo-boos and their sickness. You know, when you're gone on the road, there's that mutual support and respect there.
Yeah. Now you have 2 daughters that are like out in high school, going out at night and dating and whatever else. So you're like, so when I'm out of town, I know when I get back, it's like you have to kind of reacclimate yourself back into the household, because she does. Like, you know, Annie, you guys are very good friends. Like, she's a boss woman and she runs it and she's in control of everything. So you get back and you're kind of like, hey, I'm home. You know, like, is it cool to come in?
Yeah.
Because that's how
Am
she
I
has that.
disrupting the rhythm?
Right. They have the house on lock.
Yeah, for sure. Is that ever, does she ever have any or voice any complaints or difficulties? I would say, I mean, I know she's supportive. I don't want to say complaints in a way, but, you know, is it hard? Yeah,
sure. I think there's that ebb and flow constantly, you know, and it's nothing out of like spite. It's out of love, but it's out of like, you know, we were just recently in Santa Monica and I just gotten back from Abu Dhabi. I was gone for so long, and that same week we go out of town. And I think it was just, it's an adjustment period, right? Like, you know, she instantly goes to like, well, you're never here or you're always gone. It's like, I'm here right now. So we shouldn't be fighting over anything that we can't control. But it's not her fault. But I've literally been on the road for the last 3.5 weeks, you know?
Yeah.
So there's some adjustments, and there's some times where you're just like, you know, you're almost invading their privacy. Yeah, you're like, right? Like, you're here, and then it's like, well, who's this person now? You know, so you're almost just
such a big contrast in the relationship.
It is. Yeah, it can be tough. And you know, when I'm on the road, I might not speak to her every day, like maybe a text message here and there. But like when you're in Abu Dhabi, your time is so completely opposite that I'll be asleep and then their day is going on. So I might miss an entire day, and then I wake up and they're going to bed. So you might be missing them completely.
I remember the month that I left Singapore. So Daxton was pretty much 3 months old on the dot, because it was during COVID. And I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy. I don't like it. I don't know what's going on, but I need space. I need to be able to drive. I need to go camping or something, you know, and you can't do that in Singapore. So because pretty much the day he turned 3 months, I was like, we're on a plane and we're going home. But Johnny was still maybe going to have a fight. We weren't sure yet. So he stayed for an extra month or so.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so I traveled home on a flight with a newborn and a 2-year-old by myself with all of our bags. It was crazy. It was actually hilarious. There's a picture I have with like this mountain of bags. I'm like, I don't even know how I did that. And then Daxton's strapped to the front of me, like Amaya's on my hip. I'm like pushing something. I have like a bag under my arm on this side and pushing this mountain full of bags through the LAX airport. But anyways, the whole point though is that, to your point, is it was really difficult, and we would, you know, not always be able to connect on the same time. So sometimes it was just a quick text or something. And I can only imagine how difficult that would be, like, ongoing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no off season for us, you know? That's the one thing that's tough about our sport is like, you know, in football or basketball or whatever, you have an off season, a little bit of off season. So you can schedule out that time during it. Now it's like, okay, you have to kind of plan ahead. Like, all right, we don't have any fights coming up for this amount of time. Then what can I do? Is there a quick trip we can go on? You know? So unless you really just hard sell, like, all right, this date, I'm not leaving no matter what happens, whoever's fighting, I'm going on this trip or I'm doing whatever, you know?
When did you know you wanted to be a coach?
I think I always knew I'd be a coach. I thought it would definitely be in football. You know, I'm raised by a football coach. My uncles were all coaches. My dad was the first non-head coach to be inducted in the Nevada State Hall of Fame. So like just coaching within my lineage. Even my uncle, my great uncle, was a coach for the Washington Redskins and the Cleveland Browns. So I just knew coaching would be there. Probably was going to be in football. But, you know, really, I would say it was Jay Haran. Jay Haran said to me one time, and I'll never forget this conversation. We had it on the boxing ring. He's like, hey, what do you want to accomplish with this sport? Are you trying to fight? You trying to this? You trying to that? And I really wasn't sure. And I was like, you know, I really don't know. I know I enjoy being here, and I know I enjoy. He's like, bro, you would make a great coach. And I'll never forget that conversation having with Jay. And really, like, why do you say that? He's like, man, like, you have this, and that kind of like sparked the interest of me like looking to pursue it a little bit better, a little bit more. And then it was like Dennis, and then really it was like Follis. Follis was on me about like, hey, you need to refine this and this and this. And he goes, bro, I'll never forget having that conversation with Robert. He goes, I promise you, you'll be one of the best coaches to ever do this if you can stay on this sort of path, and gave me almost a checklist of things to work on. And that's what I did.
So was Follis training in Vegas at that time, or how far into this was it? Because you kind of started, and you said, what was it, 06? You found the gym? 07?
06, 07. And then really it was like I latched on to Dennis, because Dennis was the guy that came to Xtreme. He started coaching maybe 3 months after we opened. Randy had called Dennis and asked him to move out. So Dennis was still an active fighter at the time. And then Dennis was coaching all these morning shifts, morning classes. And Dennis didn't drive. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a driver's license even. So, but him and I really hit it off. And he took me under his wing to the extent where it was like all my full-time training, all my day training was with Dennis. I'd go to school and then I'd go to work at night, and I'd just rinse and repeat over and over and over. So Follis was Dennis's head coach, and Robert was still maybe up at Team Quest. I don't know what when that whole thing kind of
that's
Quest
where
left
I met
and everything.
Robert was up at Team Quest. Yeah,
so that's where I met Rob, was through Dennis when he was still at Quest.
Okay.
Then there was because Randy broke off and went and opened Xtreme. Dan broke off and went and opened Team Quest in Temecula, and then Lin was running the one up in the old school one in Portland. So yeah, and then Robert, I don't know where he went in that kind of shuffle of stuff that happened, but at one point it was just like Robert would come to the gym and train with Dennis and help Dennis get ready for some fights. And then him and I really, and then him and I really hit it off. And then Robert, I remember, was kind of bouncing around to different gyms. I know he was helping Levin and helping Ed Herman. Yeah, he was trying to kind of
find a home, so to speak. Yeah,
exactly. So then, do you remember when he had that like bad back problem? His back was just messed up.
Yeah, he almost thought he wasn't going to be able to coach or do anything anymore because it was so debilitating.
Yeah, like he was a mess.
Yeah.
So he came and stayed at the house for like a week. He found some chiropractor or massage therapist, whoever, who was able to find that it was his psoas.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what psoas was. I can't spell psoas.
It was on the front side, because I remember that. It was like his psoas and his like hip flexors.
His hip flexors and his psoas were messing his lower back up so much that he couldn't move. So
people at desk jobs get this problem a lot because they sit for a long period of time and they shorten, and then they go to stand up and then realize it's putting pressure on their lower back.
Exactly. So Robert found this therapist or physical therapist, whatever it was, and he stayed at my home for like a week to get this work done. And this guy found out it was his psoas. I remember like Robert, like crazy, coming home, and like what the guy was explaining to him, that this energy, these toxins, all this stuff get built in this muscle. And it was so tight. He said it was like a frozen piece of meat, and that he would work on this psoas, and then like all the way to Robert would be moved to emotion, right? He would be crying because these emotions would be coming out that's stored into these muscles that you would have. He would come home, and then we would sit and talk, and then he would go back again the next day and get this work, and did this for over a week, to the point where his back was like completely cured, right? He knew what it was. He knew what was causing it. And then during that time though, we got to talking, like, bro, like, what about moving out to Vegas? And he goes, I don't really want to coach fighters. I just want to coach jiu-jitsu. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that's when he started working over at Excel up north. He was doing that for a little bit, and then, man, like, I think just the bug got him again, and he was ready to come back. And he said, what would this look like? How would I be able to coach at Xtreme? Myself and Dennis had a certain amount, a handful of classes at the time, and myself and Dennis were like, dude, we'll give you these classes to make it work for you, to be able to make it advantageous for you to come over to Xtreme. We need you. We need your guidance. And right away, when he came to Xtreme, I think it just raised the level of everyone in the room, right? Like the pro team, everything got better because of Robert, and him coming to Xtreme just made us all better.
Yeah. I remember coming down to coach Tough 18 and learning that after the fact that Robert Follis was at Xtreme Couture. And really he was the only one that I knew at that time. I think I had popped into Xtreme Couture a couple times over that like training period, just trying to get more training in. But I didn't know that Robert was training there, or as a coach there. And then when I found that out, I was like, I was kind of looking for a place to transition to as well, because Hallman's place was kind of, I mean, that's where I was training at. I was living in a 22-foot RV with 2 other fighters, outside of a barn. And that's, I was on food stamps. Yeah. I was super poor. I mean, obviously, MMA didn't make money yet then, but women's MMA really didn't make any money.
At all.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So I was looking for a place to change and, get my training more serious and whatnot. So then I found out that Robert was here, and that's really what brought me to Xtreme Couture. But like you, never was a professional fighter. One of the best coaches to ever do it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I gained so much knowledge from his lead, I think, on a lot of that stuff. I think a lot of your insecurities, right? Like I had a lot of the same. But yeah, it was a fight in Kansas City. Tim Elliott was fighting out there and Roy Nelson. And so myself and Robert were there. I asked Roy if we can put Robert in the corner. He said, yeah. Tim fought on the card, fought great. It was that fight in particular where I remember having a drink with Robert afterwards, and that's kind of when he laid this all out for me. He's like, look, man, like your leadership qualities, your enthusiasm, your this, your that. He said, eventually when your skills, when your fight IQ reaches the level of what your leadership qualities are, he said, you're going to be one of the best in the world to ever do this. And I didn't believe it at the time, but somebody believed it before I did. And he put me on that path of really believing and understanding, So it's pretty cool that he saw that in me well before I ever saw it myself.
I want to share something really cool with you right here. This little guy, this little bear, that is actually made from Robert's flannel.
That's crazy. Yeah, I remember that. I know.
So he's always here and it really inspired the podcast to call it Built for Growth, because remember he always used to. I mean, he had all these Follisisms, we would call it. Yeah. But one that always stuck with me was that basically you're gonna change. Like change is inevitable, but growth is not.
Right. Yeah.
And we have to choose to grow, pick our direction, and stop being passive.
For sure.
Yeah. I
love the fact that like I'm able to I speak with Rick quite frequently, and it's so crazy to me to be able to speak to Rick, because in a lot of ways I feel like I still have Robert. It's pretty cool.
They sound so similar.
Oh, dude, eerily similar.
It's so trippy.
Yeah, eerily similar. Like mannerisms and like speaking with him, his voice, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was cool. Like when I won Coach of the Year in 2020, he was the first guy that I called. Was Rick. I didn't call my wife. I was like, I'm calling Rick. And I told him, like, dude, like Robert would be so pumped right now.
Yeah, he would be for sure. Yeah. He saw something great in you, and I'm glad that you followed it. And for anybody listening to this episode that doesn't know the background here, we lost Robert Follis in 2017 to suicide. I think that Robert was always somebody who showed up and gave everything that he had, and sometimes more than he had, to the people around him. He would absolutely absorb the energy of a room and then amplify it tenfold. Yeah,
100%. And I think like, over time you started to learn and understand just really how much was taken out of him, Yeah. I think as a coach, I'm really empathetic to that situation now that myself and Dennis have walked in those shoes, right? Like in the time we were very young in our careers, but looking back at it, you're like, I get it now,
Yeah. Well, and his family coming out, was, I would say, his brother and his sister. So as you know, obviously, but some people probably don't, that one of Follis's brothers had already committed suicide.
Randy.
And then Rick and what is the sister's name?
Can't remember.
Yeah. So, they kind of came out and started talking about the reasons why they were having such hardships and the disjointed family. And it's so sad to me that organized religion sometimes can make things so black or white that you lose the most important part of it, which is always somewhere in the middle, right? And it's your family, like your connectedness, and they excommunicated their children because the kids didn't
follow the religion.
Yeah, to a T.
That was the time I think I remember seeing Robert the most broken was when Randy passed away. He was in my office and they went to the funeral, and he thought that by getting them all back together for this funeral that he can, like, Robert can fix this.
I know.
And when it didn't work, it didn't fix. That's when I really felt like Robert was truly broken then, I just remember him, how upset he was. And you know, unfortunately, that was to me like the beginning of the end.
I think so too. I think he always held on to hope that someday the family would come back together. And I think his mom, what it seemed like, she kind of wanted that, but was too afraid to go against the dad and, you know, the church and the backlash. And so she didn't. But in that final meeting, when they said, okay, here's your one chance to kind of come back to the church and be back with your family or not, you know, it's like how devastating.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
Yeah. Well, he's dearly missed. I miss Robert a ton. And I kind of, as I mentioned, led this podcast with him in mind, you know, because as I look at the next chapter for me, you know, and I'm not done fighting yet. I still want to fight, but I look at the next chapter and say, what can I do? How can I pay it forward for all the people who have really made such a big impact in my life? And losing Robert was a huge loss, a huge negative, but he impacted my life in so many positive ways that I have to sit back and say, what can I do to help other people? Like, how can I pay that forward? What can 100%. What can I show people? And maybe it's just one conversation at a time. Yeah. Maybe it's just the candid honesty that, you know, I was at a moment like that too, you know, really dark moment. Yeah. You know, when I fought in New York in November, Raquel. Yeah. I was, you know, on the verge of suicide.
I remember that.
You know, and on the outside, not much changed. Just kind of like with Robert, you know, on the outside, not much changed. You know, if you didn't really have, a lot of people don't really have access. I didn't even really have access to the demons inside. Yeah. You know, I was trying so hard to just pretend and compartmentalize and put it all into a place where nobody would deal with it or see it, including myself. Yeah. But eventually it becomes all consuming.
I remember holding pads for you the week before you left in the small cage. And I remember like looking at you and I was like, are you okay? And you're like fighting tears. I remember that. You're like, I just don't want to be here. And I remember like when you lost and you retired, I remember looking at Annie. I'm like, like I knew like something was up in that moment, you know? Yeah. But do you remember that? I remember like literally like looking at you in the cage and you're like, are you all right? And you're like, nope. Yeah. Like, nope. I hate everything.
You know, I just remember the people that were there for me along my way. I can't say a lot of specifics that I remember because at that time I wasn't really here.
You're just kind of going through autopilot.
It's the only way that I could kind of survive would be to always not be here. Yeah. And so what's odd is that I don't really remember the fight. I don't remember that week very well. It's kind of like those memories you have when you're like 2 or 3 years old. It's just blurs. Remember like little tiny pieces. Yeah. But I don't remember the people that were there. It's so crazy. Sometimes people are like, you remember that, you know, time in New York?
Nope.
No, like it's so crazy. I'm like, but that's the only way I don't know how I knew how to survive was to just not be here.
I wonder if that's like a part of our mind just wanting to shut it down or shut it off, like almost like a PTSD thing. It's like,
I think so.
You know, like I'm just going to close off this section of my life. I think it's a
disassociation.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, when you got to remember too, you know, my ex was still very much a part of all of that at the time. And even though we had split and we're not together, the entire motivation the entire time was to, you know, to get back into control. Right. And that's why I remember him vehemently protesting my retirement inside the cage. I remember looking at Follis and saying, I'm done. Right. And he was like, you know, he kind of like accepted it. Right. You know?
Yeah, but somebody else wouldn't.
Yeah, someone else wouldn't because that was like the last hook.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's kind of what it was for me, was disconnecting the hooks. Like I needed to get away from it.
You told me that. I remember like afterwards, you're just like, I just need a hard reset. And like, I'll probably be back, but I just got to rip the Band-Aid off and get the fuck out of here for a little bit. And when the dust settles, I'll see you soon. And I remember like, okay, see you in a few years. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. 4.5, 5 years, 2 kids later. Yeah. Hey. A few years, but it was a good journey. Why didn't you ever pursue fighting more? And how many fights did you have? You had a few amateur fights, right?
No amateurs because at the time in Vegas, there was no amateur fights. At the time, it was like Tough Enough ended up coming in, but it was only pro shows. Okay. So Phil Friedman, a good friend of mine, training partner, heavyweight, big dude. He ended up fighting like Joey Beltran and like 2 guys. He was like 1-1. But remember, like there was no like experimental process. There was no amateur team. There was no amateur fights. You couldn't get a lot of this done. You just jumped into pro. And if you got smoked, you're like, you're 0-1, you know? So,
for breadcrumbs, by the way, it's not like there's even any pay for that.
So, and this is the funny part about that story was Dennis was getting ready to fight. It was at the Riviera, which is no longer even existing anymore. Dennis was fighting on a card, and I'm working with Dennis. I mean, we're just drilling or doing something. And the promoter of the show comes in and drop off tickets for Dennis and say, what's up? And he says to me, he was like, hey, what weight do you fight at? I'm like, oh, I don't, I'm like a 205 or something like that. He said, would you be interested in fighting on our card? We need a guy at 205. And I was like, okay, like cool. Sounds cool. He said, we'll pay $2,000 flat, blah, 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 blah. Goes through this whole thing. I was like, all right, let me ask my wife. So Annie is like this pregnant with McKenna, like ready to bust. And I remember going home and I was like, hey babe, like, what do you think? Like this guy offered me a fight. Like it's on the same card as Dennis.
She's
like,
probably all hormonal.
She's like, are you out of your fucking mind? Like, no.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. And she's like, so your job is bartending with your hands. You're on your legs, on your feet. You're in the academy or you got hired by these fire departments. Like, do you want to make $2,000 just to make $2,000? Like, do you want to be a pro fighter? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't really care. Like, I was just like, oh, I'm down to fight. You know who the guy was? Ryan Bader.
Oh, no way.
Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader fought on this card. He would have bounced my head off the fucking canvas. I would have been in a wheelchair my entire life. I definitely would have been 0-1, right? Like, what? Like, but I knew who Brian Bader was because of football. Bader played up at McQueen. It was like a really good high school back in, when we were growing up in Reno. So I knew who he was. I'm like, oh, I know Bader. He played defense. He's a linebacker or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great. Like, let's compete. I wasn't thinking like fight or anything like that. I wanted to compete. Thank God my wife was smart enough to tell me no, right? Yeah. So, and that was really it. Like, it kind of just, the funny thing Dennis and I would always say was like, hey, we'll go on one of these like trips to Utah. We're cornering somebody. And then like, we just won't tell anybody. We'll just throw you in the cage and have you in a fight just so you just can get it done. And I wanted to, like, I was definitely like down to do it. But it just kept passing me by. And it's to the point where it's like, I'm 45 years old now, it's like, there's no turning that back. But that was really the one time where I was like, I'm definitely considering this. This is cool. Like I'm down to do it. Well, I was like, fuck no.
Well, and I think the more that a coaching job takes off, the more selfless you have to be. And when you are a fighter, you have to be selfish. Sure. Everybody around you has to sacrifice.
Right. And I wasn't really like maybe I was coaching a little bit, but I wasn't even coaching enough to really be like in the position I'm at today. But everything was just based around Dennis, learning from Dennis and drilling with Dennis and training with him. And then I'd go to pro practice on Mondays because Mondays was my night off for the bar. So I'd go to like basically MMA grappling practice. So we were doing so much jiu-jitsu at the time. And then like Martin Campbell was like, hey, bro, you need to start coming to Monday practice because you think you're going to triangle choke this guy here and I'm just going to elbow your brains in. And I was like, okay. Showed up to MMA practice on Monday.
Challenge accepted.
It wasn't really that. I was like, oh, I'm missing out on something.
Okay.
Right? Because you're coaching these tactics to get to like submissions. And Campman and Gray and all these guys are like, no, bro, you need to get to this spot so you can punch somebody's head in. And I'm like, oh. So then you go to practice and you're like, I'm gonna throw a triangle choke up, and then a dude just hitting you with a hammer fist the whole time. You're like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is not what I expected. So it totally like made a shift in my mindset as far as like coaching goes. Is like, oh, this is the end all be all. Like submissions are cool and all, but like punching somebody's brains in this is way better.
Definitely. No, you're a good ground. When you coach, you show a lot of ground and pound, which is always something I think is favorable because it opens the submissions up.
Right. Like,
when people feel safe, they can defend submissions better. But when they start to get, sustain some damage,
right?
Everything opens up.
Do you remember like when Robert would make us do like when we do those positions, like hit him hard, hit him hard to make it urgent, right? Make him move in a way that if your opponent was doing that, and they're not going to just be hitting you pepper, they're going to be dropping it on you. So that's when we started doing Big Glove Monday.
Yeah.
Right. Randy would make us do Big Glove Monday. So you had these big puffy gloves and you can, 16 ounces and you're ground and pounding hard.
Yeah.
But what happens is guys are like, oh shit, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be here. The emphasis is on control and ground and pound.
That's a difficult thing as a training partner to try to master because you don't want to hit people too hard, but you want a realistic look.
100%.
And so I always keep in mind that if I'm the person getting hit, and if they are being like that, you can tell they're not, going to bash your brains in. I'll move as though I am panicked.
Right.
Because I know that they could.
Right.
So they're looking for that reaction. They want a realistic look. So I'll move like it's a sense of urgency to give them that so that they don't have to beat my brains in. Like, I get it. You could totally mess me up right now.
Yeah.
But it's so annoying when people don't do that. And I'm like, do you realize like how badly I could just ruin your world right now? And you just hanging out like we're in a walk in the park,
Right.
And then you got to stick them with a couple good ones to get the good reaction.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, this is what I got to do. And I don't really want to have to hurt you, but that's where a good body punch comes in.
100%.
Right? You don't have to hit him in the head so hard.
And
you
now,
get a good
like
one to the gut.
the change of the rules now with the downed opponent, like we got word about the downed opponent, the date that they were going to set it. So a lot of things that we start doing now is like predicated to, okay, when we score this, remember the levitation series that Follis used to always make us run? We jack the hip and kind of run the head series. Well, he might put his hand on the ground now, but now I can knee him there.
Yeah.
Right. So like all these like ways of trying to evolve and become better with like where we're setting people up with our ground and pound is now like, it's kind of cool because the change of the rule set now.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about being a coach?
I mean, there's so many things. I think that always is going to change. But for me right now is like, the Taylor Gordados of the world, the people that are like right on the cusp, and you see the talent, you see the things that they can accomplish. I say Taylor because the PFL was such a huge journey for her. She was like 1-1, I think, as a pro. And
she's so good.
She's so good.
She's so talented.
And like so driven, so talented. Is one of the best teammates you're ever going to find, right? Like she's there for everybody. And I think like seeing her advancements in PFL and seeing her realize what she's capable of was huge for me as a coach, because like it was just like food for the soul, man. It's like I'm on this ship, I'm navigating, right? But she's really truly the captain, and like she knows like, okay, I belong here, So
did you know that Rhonda and Taylor fought? I'm sure you knew that, but someone asked her at one point, what was the most talented or most promising opponent that she had ever faced? And it was, especially in her amateur days, like who she thought was going to become something or was really talented. And she said Taylor.
Yeah, I can see that.
I can see it too. Yeah.
And like now, I just wish that like Mick or somebody would just give her that opportunity.
Yeah.
And every time she fights, and Mick and I are boys. And I just, at this point, like, I don't care. I'm going to fucking scream the Taylor Gordado name in his ear every time. I'm like, bro, Taylor would beat that girl. Mm-hmm. Taylor would smoke that girl you just had in the cage. Or like Taylor would win a fight. I'll just send her over the video. Hey, you wanted that finish? She said, here, there it is. Yeah. She's got 2 of them in a row now. So when she lost to Kayla, I was like, hey, maybe we can jump over to the UFC and go fight at 135, your natural weight class, rather than 55.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or 45. What is it, 55? I think she was doing in PFL.
Yeah, PF 55.
Right,
yeah.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. Like she was fighting 2 weight classes above her. And I'm like, you're a 35er. Let's get some fights at 35.
Yeah, and Kayla's not a 35er. Kayla can make 35, but it takes everything she has.
Right.
And it's really a pretty exaggerated reach for her to make it.
Right.
She can do it.
Yeah.
But
it's almost like you're cut to 25, I wonder. Because like your whole entire camp at 25 was you making weight. Mm-hmm. Like we didn't train at all. Remember? Like we was like, I got to make weight.
I know.
That was crazy.
So much. All long form training, hours and hours, and running and biking and just trying to get muscle off at that point.
Yeah.
It's not like
that whole
much
camp was like
fat.
you making weight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was
the fight.
Yeah. So I think for me, like my goals now, hey, you got the Francises, the Sean Stricklands, the Danny Igays. These guys they're all set, right? They're great human beings. They've some of them won world titles, but how are you bringing the next crop along, right? Like I want to see Taylor financially stable, right? Yeah. Like I want to see these young guys that we're bringing up. I want to see them realize their full potential. And that to me is really like the food for your soul right now for as a coach is like the growth is bringing them along with us, right? No man left behind.
Tell me about that journey with Francis a little bit, because when Francis first came over, and he didn't even really speak English very well.
No, he didn't.
And what he would wear was it FUBU? I can't remember. He'd wear like these different clothes and like he had like the bright bleach streak in his hair and so funny. So when he first started to come over, I remember I helped him set up his LLC.
Yep.
And he's just such a cool, really like humble dude. He still calls me every once in a while. He's like, Mama Misha, how's it going?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's cool. You still remember the little people. He's like, we talk about little people, you know? But he's so cool. But talk about a journey though. I mean, that 100%. Story is crazy. So just, I know we're coming to the end of this, but I really wanted to get your take on, you know, when you started working with Francis, and because you just said that that's one of the most rewarding things as a coach, you know, he was that person that wasn't supposed to do what he did. And that must have been an incredible ride as a coach for you to get to help him in that.
Best seat in the house, right? Like I just got to be there and kind of watch his journey. Just an athletic specimen, as we all know. And not necessarily was it a lot of things. Like I know there's X's and O's that we've done. We've worked on those things, but I think it was a lot of the right environment for him. So he lost to Stipe. He fought Derek Lewis, and then he made the change over to Xtreme full time. I feel like he was very guarded, right? He didn't let a lot of people in during that time. But we always kind of laugh because, you know me, I'm fucking hugger, high five. And he's like, who's this white boy always giving me hugs and whatever else? And what's up, brother? You know, and he's like, I'm not your brother. You know, he's like, that's just not culturally the same where he comes from. But he always told me, he's like, bro, it's always your energy. Like you always had this uplifting energy, made me feel good. And so he fought Curtis Blades. I think that was in Singapore. I can't remember. I don't remember overseas. Either. Fought Curtis Blades, beat him. Next fight was Kane. That was the fight that Markel had asked me if I would start working with Francis. And we just didn't really have like time, or it was more like a manager. I didn't know if that was what Francis wanted.
Right.
I know that was what Markel wanted.
And Markel was his
manager at the time.
Yeah, okay.
And, you know, I just didn't feel like there was a big connection between me and him.
Yeah, and you don't want to push you're never the type to push yourself on
like
somebody.
I didn't like. I wanted it to be organic. And he would come to the gym and he was my boy. And if he wanted help or if he did anything, then we were all there to help him. You know, I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, and I didn't want to be like, I'm trying to recruit this guy either. Yeah. You know, so it was just a weird dynamic at the time. And then he goes and beats Kane the way he beat Kane. Then it was the Junior Dos Santos fight. That's when he had asked that I think we're all traveling out there together. Emily was on the card, Joe B was on the card, and he's like, hey, you want to hop in my corner? We're going to be out there. Sure. So again, it was, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. I know my role is I'm the fourth in the corner. And he just grappled me and beat the shit out of me the whole time. We just rolled. I was a body for him. He went out and did his thing versus Junior. We get in the back and he's like, before press conference, he has a suit on, we're eating a slice of pizza. And he's like, hey man, like I've been testing you. I was like, what do you mean you've been testing me? He's like, you're a real dude. You care about me. You care about the people that you're around. You're not trying to like gain something against anyone. Like you're not trying to take advantage of anybody. He said, what do you think about us working together from here on out? And I said, I would love to. So I said, when we get back, let's go and sit down and have dinner. And I said, I want you to kind of lay out how I can be a service to you. How can I help you? And that was our dinner. And we literally we talked for 2-3 hours. At one point during that dinner, I said to Francis, I said, bro, what are you afraid of? Like, what scares you? Right? You're the fucking, like, you're the baddest man on the planet.
What gives you a nightmare at night?
What makes you vulnerable, right? And the exact words I said to him, who's your boogeyman? Like, what's your boogeyman? Like, what lives under your bed? And he said to me, he's like, you know, I never want to feel the same way that I felt when I fought Stipe. I never want to feel like that. And I never want to feel like the way that I felt when I fought Derek Lewis. I said, I know that there was a disconnection with this, and this. So we just started formulating a plan. Okay, well, what made you feel this way? How was your camps? How was your situation with your former coach? What are the things that I can do to help bring the best out of you? And we just started talking and laying things out, right? And obviously, cardio and wrestling became part of what he felt X's and O's wise that he needed. So it led me to believe in certain ways, how can we make this fun for him? How can we make it enjoyable for him to show up to do the things that he feels that are deficiencies, right? What if we made him an offensive wrestler? What if instead of going, hey, bro, you got to learn to defend takedowns and sprawl and down block and this, what if we just started teaching you how to take people down and beat them up and made it more fun? He's athletic
enough for it.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
But what did it do? It was reverse engineering what he needed. If you can take the cartridge apart, you can put it back together.
Yep.
So if you're offensive wrestling, inherently you're going to learn how to
defensive wrestle.
Yeah. So we just made it fun. And we were like, yo, dude, could you imagine what happens when you're going to start taking people down? We saw it a couple weeks ago, right? Let's make it fun. So that was a lot of our growth and change, and was putting him in positions that I think that were going to make him an all-around MMA fighter, better MMA fighter, fight IQ. Man, you have a great overhand. What if we tied that into a level change, right? Now people are worried about you shooting on him. So our next fight that we have, Renan Fajeda, right? We fought Renan Fajeda. And what happened? He got taken down and he got his brains beat in. So now his next fight, what do you think we're going to do?
Yep.
Level change. Yep.
Yep.
It's going to set our overhand up more. So he started to understand those things. And then a blessing in disguise for us was COVID. In a lot of ways, what happened with COVID was it put myself, Francis, and Randy Couture in a gym with no one, just us. And I'd call Randy, hey, what do you got going on today? Fucking nothing, dude. Just like the rest of the world. Hey, do you want to come in and train? Yep. I'll see you guys later on. So
that's awesome.
Francis and I would do strength and conditioning. I'd hold pads for him.
What's it like holding pads for Francis?
I mean,
you want to blow your shoulders off?
Yeah, you just run out right here on Durango and wait for a car to hit you.
I hate holding pads for people because it hurts my elbows, my shoulders, and my wrists. I can't even imagine.
That's what it's like, man. It's constant. You're constantly getting work done, and
my God.
Your shoulders, your legs, and everything's beat up because Francis does hit like that Ford Escort that everybody talks about.
I believe it. I mean, I've seen the man doing work inside, and I've seen you hold mitts for him, and I'm just like, oh
yeah, 100%.
I almost want to go bring the masseuse to you and be like, fix him. He just got broken.
Bioaccelerator, hit me up.
So and the boxing part of it, that was pretty cool. Like to see him transition to boxing and do what he did. I still feel like he won that fight against
me too. I think a lot of us do, but in a lot of ways he did win, right? Like
he did.
He did.
No,
win
he
the
absolutely
fight.
won. The judges may not have given him, but he won at life.
Yeah.
I still think he won the fight, but obviously I don't know how to judge boxing fights because I watch boxing fights, not all the time, but I watch them every once in a while. And I'm like, I'll think somebody, I'm like, this is clearly, they won. And I'm like, I don't get it. They didn't win.
The most
I don't get
effective damage was delivered by Francis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he knocked him down, he dropped him, the heavier shots. And I was there ringside. I'm sitting there next to him watching this unfold.
I think the whole world sees it how you saw it.
And it was such a cool, like almost out of body experience, like watching this fight. And I'm just kind of like playing through my mind about all these hopes and dreams and admirations that he had when we would sit and talk as just, buddies that would be at dinner. It's like, man, one day I want to box Tyson Fury. And instead of me going, hell no, bro, you never. I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. I'm on board with that, man. Let's, like I always tell people to put their hopes and dreams and admirations out there for the world. Because, why do I share so many people's things on my Instagram is like, you have a fight coming up. I want to share it. I want to put the good juju behind it. I want to put the good energy and vibes. You have a new business, you have a new podcast, whatever. Like it's up to us to help. It doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't cost you $1, but all I'm doing is trying to put that in motion, that energy that to the universe in motion. And that was something that Francis and I always had for one another, right? Like he would hype me up, I'd hype him up, vice versa. And I think that's what always made us a good team is like, dude, we just push each other.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Well, speaking of which, I appreciate all the energy and everything that you've ever given. Always supportive. You're a great coach and I think even a better person and dad. So it was awesome to have you here. I feel like it's been too long since we've been able to sit down and just have a candid conversation for an hour, learn some things about you that beers? I didn't know. Beers I know, right? Come on. More like beer pong? Mushrooms for me now.
Mushrooms and beer pong. Let's go.
Beer pong.
You're my beer pong partner.
We were the beer pong champ. I remember that. It's been a minute. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I appreciate it. We'll have to get some beer pong on the docket.
Let's do it.
Okay.